Thank you so much for joining us tonight for reading the Bible together. We're so glad to have you here as we continue our look at the Psalms and their connection with the New Testament. We've really enjoyed doing this series. We do want to remind you that we need your questions. If we want to do a question and answer on the Psalms, which we may not, we may just put those questions on the end of another episode. But if we want to do a question and answer on the Psalms, we need to have those fairly quickly here coming up. And so, and you can send on reading the Bible questions on other things as well. We would encourage that as a matter of fact. But we're looking for ones from the Psalms as soon as possible. So here's the address for that, if it's not already on the screen. And we look forward to getting email from you. And we are going to look at Psalm 31 today, and we have called this one God's Bigger Rescue Plan. And as usual, it's good to have a little bit of background, right? And we love looking back at background in Genesis and Exodus. So this week we're going to look at Exodus. Huge part of Israel's story, as we've discussed before. And we're going to look at Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through 8. And remember, the Exodus is the story of God's people leaving slavery in Egypt. We have, in Genesis, we have the story of God calling Abraham to be this blessing to the nations. And then we have Isaac and Jacob's family becomes huge. And they end up down in Egypt. And over the next 400 years, they become enslaved to the Egyptians. And so we're going to read this little excerpt here from the story of their rescue from Egypt. Then the Lord said, so people are enslaved. They're very upset about it. It's a hard situation. Genocide is happening. And so here we go. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings. And I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So not only does God hear them and say that he is going to rescue them, but he is even also going to put them in a spacious place. And so this is this is a lot more than what they are asking for, going from just being rescued to then also being put in a spacious place. So let's see if we can notice a hint of that in this excerpt that we're going to read from Psalm 31. You're just going to read a little bit of it, right?
We're reading verses 1 through 8.
We're going to read verses 1 through 8, but we would like you to read the whole thing on your own. But
yes.
Anyway, go ahead.
In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Keep me free from the trap that is set for me. For you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. I hate those who cling to worthless idols. As for me, I trust in the Lord. I'll be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. You have not given me into the hands of the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. So, what's going on here? David is remembering God's help during his early time when he was struggling and fleeing from Saul. Israel was oppressed by the Philistines. Saul is trying to kill him. He thinks back on to his early days. He was had to hide in caves, and God protected him. Eventually, not just a rock to hide, but a spacious place, because eventually God gave David the entire kingdom. But it would have been tempting for him to stay in the wilderness, but God had a bigger plan.
So, as we look at the New Testament connection, we look back at the original statement that God made to the Israelites when they were enslaved to the Egyptians. There's this group oppressing them. They're in a hard situation, and he says he's going to not only pull them out of Egypt, but take them to a broad place, a new land. And then we think about David, who is also facing oppression. Israel is facing oppression from the Philistines, and David is facing oppression from Saul. And he probably just wants to make it to the next night without getting killed, and be able to protect his men and be safe. But God has a whole kingdom in store for him. So God's people in the New Testament times are once again oppressed by foreign powers, and they're crying out to God. And they really, all they want is Rome gone. That's their main thing. Wouldn't you say? They are ready to just have God get Rome out of the way, and then they could get on and do just fine. But God has a much bigger rescue in mind. And so he sends Jesus, who isn't the rescue plan that they had thought of at all. Jesus is there to fulfill, but going all the way back to Genesis, we talked about Abraham, whose family is supposed to be a light to the nations. Jesus is there to establish God's kingdom and to make a light to the nations and to bring everyone into God's family. And this is not the plan. This is not the rescue plan they had in mind. They wanted to live their little life without mean interfering Rome. And so Jesus was not accepted, and we talked about how his kingdom was seen as the upside down kingdom. So once again, just like last week, we're going to read a piece of a psalm that is something that Jesus said on the cross. So in Luke 23, verse 46, we hear Jesus crying out with a loud voice, Father, so this Luke 23:46. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last.
So here's Jesus himself trusting God to accomplish what he said he would. And God is calling us to his very life in a similar way, because he has a much bigger rescue plan for us than we can envision on our own. God is basically concerned not that we ask for too much, but that we ask for too little.
So it's really easy to say, oh, we just need to trust God more. But in real everyday Christian life, we probably shouldn't say, just trust God. There is no just about it. This must be built up through habits of the mind and spiritual discipline until we can see and trust in God's bigger plan. This isn't something that we just one day wake up and decide, okay, I'm going to trust God and everything's going to be fine. Obviously, if you're starting that journey today, you should do that, but it's going to be a more than one day journey of just continuing to trust and trust and trust in the face of not totally understanding everything that God is doing in our lives. C.S. Lewis has a funny passage about how he never, in Mere Christianity, about how he never would tell his mom about if he had a toothache until it was really, really terrible, because he knew that even though she would give him medicine for it right away, the very next day they were going to go to the dentist and he was going to poke around and make sure there was no other problems. And he just wanted to leave well enough alone. So when we embark on this journey, we need to understand that God has a bigger plan. He's not just trying to fix one little thing in our life. So we need to reflect on how God has been with us in those times of trouble, just like David did, looking back on his own life, and also looking back at the scriptures. So taking time daily to look at the scriptures and the way that God took care of his people and looking back at the things that he's done for us. And as we do that, we need to remember that when God saves us from something, he saves us for something. And so we need to pray daily for his seeing eyes and listening ears so that we don't miss God's big plan. I want to invite you to come to church this week, or if you cannot make it in person, we'll be having it online as well. But obviously, if in person is available, that's we'd love to see you. We are returning to the lectionary, so our New Testament lesson this week will be in Luke, and so we'll see what Luke has to say about King Herod and Jesus and King Herod. We would love to see you there, and again, don't forget to send us your questions. Thanks so much for joining us.